My name is Claire Donovan. I am 71 years old now, but there is one day that still burns in my memory like it happened yesterday. The day I learned that the people who are supposed to protect you can also be the first ones to betray you. I was 15 when it happened. 15, still trying to find my place in a house that no longer felt like mine. My father had remarried only a year earlier, and with that marriage came Ryan, my new stepbrother. He was 17, tall, athletic, the kind of boy people praised without ever looking too closely. Teachers called him promising. Neighbors said he was polite. My father, Walter, adored him. To me, he was a shadow always watching. That evening had been ordinary. I'd walked home from school, dropped my bag by the door, and gone straight to the bathroom. The day had been hot and sticky, and the shower was the only place I felt like I could breathe. I let the steam fill the room, stripped off my clothes, and stepped under the water. The moment the spray hit my shoulders, I felt safe. The bathroom was the one place no one could bother me. No one could tell me I was too loud, too dramatic, too much. The sound of the water drowned out the house. I closed my eyes, leaned against the tile, and let myself forget for just a moment that Ryan existed. But then the door creaked, froze. My heart thudded once, hard. The bathroom door should have been locked. I was sure I had turned the lock. But it swung open anyway. Through the mist, a shadow appeared. Ryan! My voice cracked with panic. I reached for a towel, my hands fumbling. Get out! He didn't. The curtain shifted, yanked just enough that the cool air rushed in. His hand shot out, grabbing my wrist. The shock of it, the feel of his skin on mine when I was exposed, vulnerable, made my knees buckle. Stop! I screamed, jerking back. The water pounded against my face, mixing with tears I hadn't realized had already formed. Ryan laughed. Low, smug laugh. Relax, Claire. It's just a joke. But it wasn't a joke. His grip was too firm, his eyes too certain. He held me there, my body pressed against cold tile, my throat tight with terror. I managed to wrench free, clutching the towel to my chest, shoving past him with all the force my small frame could muster. I slammed the bathroom door and locked it this time, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might stop. For minutes I stood there, shaking, dripping wet, trying to convince myself I was still whole. When I finally stepped out, my skin felt raw. I went straight to my father. He was in the living room, newspaper in his lap, glasses perched low on his nose. He looked up when he saw me, frowning at the sight of me, trembling, wrapped in a towel. What happened? He asked. My throat tightened. Dad. Ryan came into the bathroom. He grabbed me. My words broke, but the look on my face should have said enough. I waited for outrage. For him to stand up, to call Ryan into the room, to tell him what he had done was unacceptable. I waited for the father who tucked me in at night as a little girl, who promised to keep me safe. But Walter just sighed. He folded the paper carefully, set it on the arm of the chair, and leaned back. Claire, he said, his voice calm, almost bored. You're making too much of this. Boys will be boys. The words hit me harder than Ryan's grip had. I shook my head, my voice rising. No, Dad. He was in the bathroom with me. Enough. Walter's tone sharpened, though his eyes stayed cold. You'll embarrass the family with this nonsense. Do you understand me? It's over. Don't bring it up again. I stared at him, my mouth dry, the world tilting under my feet. My father. The man I trusted most. He wasn't angry at Ryan. He was angry at me. And in that moment I understood. In this house my voice didn't matter. My pain didn't matter. Ryan's smirk from the hallway confirmed it. He leaned against the wall, arms folded, eyes gleaming with victory. My father had given him permission with just 4 words. Boys will be boys. That night, lying in my bed with the door locked and the lights off, I clutched my pillow and wept into the dark. I wasn't just grieving what Ryan had done. I was grieving the loss of my father's protection. Something in me cracked that night. And though it would take years for me to find the strength to act on it, one promise began to form in the hollow of my chest. If no one else would fight for me, one day I would fight for myself. Hang on, before I tell you what happened next, make sure you've subscribed and left your thoughts in the comments. This part gets intense. People often think betrayals happen in one sharp moment. One scream, one door slammed, one hand that shouldn't have touched. But most betrayals are built over years, like cracks forming in a wall, spreading silently until one day the whole house comes crashing down. When I was a little girl, it was just my father and me. My mother had died young when I was barely 5. I don't remember much about her except the smell of her perfume and the sound of her singing when she thought no one was listening. My father, Walter, became my world after that. He worked hard, brought home dinner, tucked me into bed. I believed, truly believed, that he would do anything to protect me. But then he met Susan. And Susan had a son, Ryan. From the moment he moved into our house, everything shifted. Ryan was 2 years older than me, tall and confident, with a kind of smile that won teachers over instantly. He had a way of walking into a room as if he already owned it. People loved him. My father especially. "Look at this kid," he'd say proudly to his friends. "Strong, smart, athletic. He's going places." First, I tried to befriend him. I thought maybe having a brother would fill the emptiness I sometimes felt at night, when I missed my mother. But Ryan wasn't interested in being a brother. He made that clear quickly. "You're not really my sister," he'd sneer when no one else was around. "Don't forget that." He teased me relentlessly, hiding my school books, mocking my clothes, calling me names he knew would sting. And yet, whenever I complained, my father brushed it off. "Boys tease, Claire. Don't be so sensitive." That phrase became the soundtrack of my teenage years. Don't be so sensitive. The cracks widened slowly. Ryan's teasing became more invasive. He'd stand in doorways when I tried to walk past, forcing me to squeeze by him. He'd flick my bra strap when no one was watching. He'd make comments about my body in a joking tone so that when I told Dad, it sounded like I was exaggerating. Dad never looked at me the same way he looked at Ryan. When Ryan scored a goal at soccer, Dad clapped the loudest from the sidelines. When Ryan brought home a good grade, Dad hung it on the fridge. When I achieved something, a spelling bee, a drawing contest, Dad smiled, but it was muted, distracted. "That's nice, Claire," he'd say, turning back to Ryan. It wasn't just favoritism. It was blindness. And with every small dismissal, I learned that my voice carried less weight than Ryan's smile. I still remember one night at dinner. He made a crude joke at my expense, something about how I wasn't developing fast enough. I flushed with humiliation, waiting for Dad to scold him. But instead Dad laughed. "Don't take it so seriously, Claire," he chuckled. "He's just kidding." Susan looked down at her plate, silent. I looked at her, desperate for backup, but she never once spoke against her son. That was when I began to understand that in our house, truth didn't matter. Perception did. Ryan looked good to the world. And Dad wanted to believe the best about him, needed to believe it so badly that he ignored the obvious. By the time I was 14, I had developed strategies to avoid him. I locked my bedroom door. I never changed clothes without double-checking that he wasn't around. I planned my showers when I thought he was out. Still, the cracks kept spreading. One summer afternoon, I was reading on the porch when Ryan walked up and leaned against the doorframe. He stared at me for a long time before saying, "You're kind of pretty, you know." Not that Dad notices. The words sent a chill down my spine. I told Dad later, stammering, unsure how to explain the way Ryan's eyes had lingered. Dad waved it off. "Claire, you're imagining things. Ryan's just a boy. He doesn't mean anything by it." Boys will be boys. That was the excuse. Every time. For every comment, every stare, every cruel joke, every hand that lingered just a little too long. Boys will be boys. And every time Dad said it, something inside me broke a little more. By the time the night of the shower came, the night Ryan finally crossed the line and proved me right, I wasn't even surprised by my father's response. Deep down, I had always known what he would say. I had been trained to expect it. But knowing didn't soften the blow. When I stood there in the living room, dripping water, trembling, telling him what had just happened, I still hoped. Some small part of me still believed the man who tucked me in as a child was in there. That he would choose me. That he would protect me. But he didn't. He looked at me with tired eyes and said the words that turned my whole world upside down. Boys will be boys. That was the moment the cracks became a collapse. The house I had thought of as home was no longer mine. The father I had trusted was no longer my protector. And the boy who had tormented me for years knew he had just been handed permission to keep going. That night, as I lay in bed with my door locked, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. I was alone. And worse, I was trapped. Because if my own father wouldn't believe me, who would? Before we move on, take a second to hit subscribe and drop a comment. I'd love to hear what you think so far. After that night in the bathroom, I thought things couldn't get worse. I thought Ryan had already taken the one thing I had left, my sense of safety in my own home. But I was wrong. What he took next was something deeper. My belief that speaking up mattered. The days after were a blur. I went to school, sat through classes, laughed when my friends laughed. On the outside, I looked like any other girl. But inside, I carried a weight too heavy for 15-year-old shoulders. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt the tug on my wrist, the cold tile against my back, the sound of my father's voice saying boys will be boys. Ryan, on the other hand, walked lighter than ever. He strutted through the hallways at school, captain of his soccer team, girls trailing behind him, teachers praising him. Home he grew bolder. He brushed against me in the kitchen, his smirk daring me to say something. He lingered outside my door at night, knocking softly and whispering my name through the crack just to remind me he could. And each time I told Dad, each time I tried to explain, Dad, he won't leave me alone. Dad, he was outside my room last night. Dad, he keeps touching me. But Walter's answer never changed. You're too sensitive. Don't make trouble. Claire, stop exaggerating. Ryan's a good kid. The more I tried, the less he listened. Until one evening, after another tense dinner, I finally shouted it. He grabbed me. He hurt me. Why don't you care? My father slammed his fist on the table, the silverware rattling. Enough. His voice was sharp, final. Do you want to ruin this family? Do you want to destroy everything we've built just because you can't handle a boy being a boy? That was the night I stopped trying to tell him. Because how many times can you scream into a void before you go silent? But Ryan knew. He knew my father wouldn't protect me. He knew my words meant nothing in that house. And with every dismissive shrug, every boys will be boys, my father handed him more power. One night, when Susan was out visiting a friend and Dad had gone to bed early, Ryan cornered me in the hallway. The house was dark, the only light coming from the dim glow of the bathroom nightlight. I was carrying laundry, trying to get to my room, when he stepped in front of me. You know Dad doesn't care what you say, he whispered, his breath hot against my ear. You're all mine now. The basket dropped from my hands, clothes spilling across the floor. I shoved past him, heart racing, but his laugh followed me down the hall. That laugh haunted me for years. It wasn't just about what he did. It was about what he knew. That no one would stop him. That my father would never hold him accountable. That my silence had been chosen for me. And in that silence I broke. I stopped eating. I stopped sleeping. I stopped looking people in the eye. At school, teachers asked if I was okay if something was wrong at home. I shook my head. I couldn't tell them. Because what if they told my father? What if it came back to Ryan? At night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening for footsteps outside my door. Every creak of the floorboards made my stomach twist. Some nights I thought about running away. Other nights I thought about ending it altogether, imagining how peaceful it would be to finally stop fighting. But something always stopped me. Maybe it was the memory of my mother's perfume. Maybe it was the faces of the few friends who still laughed with me at school, who had no idea how much their laughter kept me tethered. Or maybe it was the stubborn little voice inside me that whispered, "Not yet. Not like this." Because as broken as I felt, a part of me knew that if I disappeared, Ryan would win. My father would shake his head sadly, blame my sensitivity, and go on praising the boy who had destroyed me. And I couldn't let that be my ending. The lowest point came one summer night. Susan was asleep. Dad was out late. I was in the kitchen pouring a glass of water when Ryan walked in. He leaned against the fridge, blocking the light, his grin sharp. "You know," he said casually, "you should thank me. Nobody else looks at you the way I do." I froze, glass trembling in my hand. He stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "And nobody's ever going to believe you. Dad made that clear, didn't he?" His words sank in like poison. And for the first time I realized he was right. No one believed me. Not my father. Not Susan. Not the family who only saw Ryan's charm. I was alone. Completely, utterly alone. That night, I locked myself in my room, slid down the door, and cried until my body ached. I felt like nothing. Invisible, voiceless, powerless. I was sure I would never get that power back. But in that darkness, a flicker sparked. Because while Ryan's words cut deep, they also told me something important. He was afraid of the truth. He mocked me for speaking, but he still worked hard to make sure I stayed quiet. And if he feared my voice, maybe that meant it was stronger than I realized. That was the thought that pulled me through the long, suffocating nights. That was the ember I held onto, even when everything else felt cold. I didn't know how yet. I didn't know when. But someday I promised myself he would hear me. My father would hear me. And this time they wouldn't be able to look away. Before we go any further, click subscribe and let me know in the comments. What would you have done in my shoes? Grief can keep you still. Fear can keep you quiet. But anger, real anger, has a way of pulling you back to your feet. In the weeks after that night in the kitchen, after Ryan smirked and told me no one would ever believe me, I fell into a kind of silence I had never known before. On the outside I looked the same. I went to school. I did my chores. I ate dinner across from him, even as he smirked at me, daring me to speak. But inside something was shifting. His words echoed again and again. "Nobody's ever going to believe you." And instead of breaking me further, they lit a fire. Because if the only thing standing between him and exposure was my silence, then maybe my silence was the strongest weapon I had left to break. I began to plan. First it was small. I started writing. Not just in a diary, not just with vague sentences like I had before. I wrote everything. The date, the time, the words he said, the way my father dismissed me. I wrote about every knock at my door, every smirk at the dinner table, every cruel whisper in the hallway. I kept the notebook hidden in a shoebox under my bed, tucked beneath a pile of old school papers no one would bother with. Each page felt like a step toward taking something back. It wasn't just memory anymore. It was proof. Next, I began watching. Ryan liked being admired. He thrived on attention. He loved school assemblies, soccer banquets, award nights. He was the kind of boy who polished his trophies and lined them up where everyone could see. He never missed a chance to be celebrated. And that was when the idea came. If he craved the spotlight so much, then the spotlight was where I would end him. I didn't know exactly how yet, But I knew it had to be public. Somewhere he couldn't laugh it off. Somewhere my father couldn't wave a hand and say, "Boys will be boys." Somewhere the words would be too loud, too undeniable. The opportunity presented itself the following spring. Our school was hosting the annual scholarship awards ceremony. A big night in the auditorium where students and their families gathered, teachers gave speeches, and the most outstanding kids were honored. Of course, Ryan was one of them. He was being given a scholarship for athletics, and Dad was beside himself with pride. "He's going to stand on that stage, Claire," Dad said one evening, beaming. "You should be proud of your brother." Brother. The word made bile rise in my throat. But it also solidified my plan. That night I sat at my desk, the window open to let in the cool air, my notebook spread before me. I read the words I had written over and over, and then I started to copy them neatly onto fresh pages. Pages I could fold into an envelope. Pages I could hand to someone who would read them aloud if my own voice failed. I wasn't sure yet if I'd have the courage to speak, but I would be ready either way. The next step was practice. Every day after school, I sat in my room and read my words out loud. At first, my voice trembled, cracking on the harder sentences. But the more I spoke them, the stronger they sounded. The words no longer belonged just to my fear. They began to belong to my strength. You grabbed me when I was vulnerable. You laughed while I cried. You told me no one would believe me. And Dad, you chose him over me. I practiced until the sentences no longer made me shake, until I could say them with steel in my voice. Meanwhile, I watched Ryan prepare for his big night. He walked around the house with that scholarship letter tucked in his folder, bragging to Susan, flexing in front of the mirror, telling Dad how colleges would be lucky to have him. Every boast made my resolve stronger. The week of the ceremony, I placed my notebook pages in a large envelope. On the front, I wrote in block letters, "Read this. Do not ignore." I kept it in my school bag, close to me at all times. The night before the event, I lay awake in bed, my heart pounding. Doubt crept in. What if no one believed me even then? What if they called me crazy or bitter or jealous? But another voice rose louder. What if they finally hear you? What if the silence finally breaks? By morning the decision was made. I wasn't just going to write. I wasn't just going to hand over an envelope. I was going to stand in that auditorium in front of teachers, parents, students, my father and Ryan himself, and I was going to speak. That evening I dressed carefully. A plain dress, my hair tied back, my notebook pages tucked securely into my purse. As I walked out the door, my father glanced at me and said, "Cheer up tonight, Claire. Don't ruin this for Ryan." I smiled faintly, but inside the fire roared. I wasn't going to ruin it. I was going to burn it to the ground. Before we move on, take a second to hit subscribe and drop a comment. I'd love to hear what you think so far. The gym never looked grand until the night they strung cheap lights across the rafters and set out rows of metal chairs like pews. Scholarship night. Banners hung crooked from the walls. A podium sat center stage with a microphone that always squealed once before it behaved. Parents filed in with programs clutched tight. Teachers smoothed their jackets and traded tired smiles. Dad walked in glowing like he owned the place. He squeezed Susan's shoulder and told me to smile for my brother. He said brother like it was a crown and a verdict. Ryan strutted 2 paces ahead in a new blazer, hair combed hard to one side, knuckles tapping the envelope in his pocket that said he was going places. He looked back at me once with a grin that said you would never dare. I sat in the 3rd row, aisle seat, plain dress, hair pinned back. My bag lay by my shoe. Inside it, an envelope thicker than it appeared. The pages had been copied clean, dates and times neat as fence posts. I had practiced the sentences until they tasted like steel. I had written a short note for the principal in case my voice failed. And I had given a sealed copy to the guidance office that morning with one sentence written on the label. Open if I do not speak. The band teacher tapped his music stand. The room settled. The principal stepped to the podium and thanked donors and grandparents and the cafeteria staff. Each name hung in the air for a second and drifted down like confetti no one had to sweep. Then the awards began. One by one, students walked up grinning while cameras clicked and baby siblings wiggled in their seats. When the principal reached the athletic scholarship, the room leaned forward as if it had been waiting all night. He cleared his throat and read the first line from a glossy card about leadership and character. He said the name we all knew was coming. The room applauded. Dad was already on his feet. Ryan started for the steps. I stood first. I was not loud. I did not need to be. The scrape of my chair against the gym floor made a clean sound that surprised even me. I stepped into the aisle with my bag in one hand and lifted my other toward the principal. I would like to speak before this award is given. Chairs creaked. The applause thinned and died. The principal blinked at me over the top of his glasses and looked to my father for an answer the way people do when a man like Walter Donovan fills a room. Dad's smile tightened. He started to shake his head. Please, I said to the principal, not to my father. I will be brief, and it is important. Ryan froze halfway up the steps, foot hovering, grin stiff. Someone coughed. The principal nodded once, curious, cautious, and stepped aside. I climbed to the podium, set my bag down, and adjusted the mic until it didn't squeal. My name is Claire Donovan, I said. This award is for character as much as achievement. There is something you need to know before you place it in anyone's hands. No one moved. The gym was a held breath. I was 19 when it happened. I said the number clearly. I was at home. Someone in my house who loved applause more than truth crossed a boundary he had no right to cross. When I told my father, he said 3 words that tried to make it small. Boys will be boys. A whisper rippled and then stilled. I did not tell the story. I did not need to. I said only what changed everything. I've kept a record. Every time I was followed down a dark hallway. Every time a door handle turned that should have stayed still. Every time my father waved away my voice. Places. I have provided copies of this record to the school, to the selection committee, and to people outside this room who do not answer to my father's smile. Dad sprang up, voice already sharp. Claire, sit down. You will not ruin this. I picked up the envelope and held it out to the principal. I am not here to ruin anything, I said, eyes still on the crowd. I am here to keep this school from rewarding what it should condemn. The principal took the envelope slowly, his face changing as he saw the neat columns of dates, the signatures of 2 teachers who had agreed that my account would be kept safe no matter who tried to bury it. He glanced toward the guidance counselor standing by the curtain. She stepped forward, took a second copy I pulled from my bag, and tucked it under her arm like something precious and breakable. Ryan found his voice first. He laughed, a practiced laugh he used on crowds. This is insane, he said. She's jealous. She has always been jealous. He turned to the principal, then to the audience. You all know me. You all know me. He said it like a spell. A boy in the second row shifted, uneasy. A mother crossed her arms. A coach at the back of the gym looked down at his shoes and did not look up again. The spell thinned. Dad came down the aisle, pointing as though pointing could keep time from moving. Claire, enough. We will deal with this at home. No, Dad. We will not. I turned the microphone slightly away from my mouth and spoke so the first rows could hear but the whole room could read my face. This is the only place you ever listen. In rooms that clap for you. That is why I chose it. The counselor stepped to the principal and spoke in a low voice. He nodded. Then he faced the microphone, cleared his throat, and did the bravest thing a person with a podium can do. He said, we are pausing the award pending a review, and we will honor our responsibility to student safety and truth. He thanked me for coming forward. He said the gym would respect the decorum of the night while the adults handled what needed handling. Dad's voice rose to a shout. You cannot pause what belongs to my family. The counselor looked at him without blinking. It belongs to the truth, Mr. Donovan. A sound that was not quite applause and not quite relief moved along the bleachers. Ryan's jaw clenched. The grin was gone. He tried to move down the steps as if the motion alone could end the moment. I stepped away from the podium and into his path. We were close enough to hear each other's breath. You told me no one would believe me. I said so only he could hear. You have always been most afraid of this part. He tried to sneer and found he could not. His eyes flicked to the envelope in the principal's hand, to the counselor's steady face, to the coach who would not meet his eyes, to Dad's fury turning smaller by the second. Then came the part one had practiced that no one could take from me. I turned back to the microphone. I will not answer questions tonight. I will not be cross-examined in the gym where he is cheered. I have given what needs to be read to those who must read it. I will say only one more thing to the girls and boys sitting in these chairs wondering what to do the next time someone tells them to be quiet. Do not be quiet. You may be told that peace is more important than truth. That family is more important than your voice. That boys will be boys. Those are sentences people use when they are afraid of the light. Speak anyway. Write it down. Put it in someone's hands. Stand where the microphone is. Silence broke in a way that did not feel like noise. Felt like a choice the room was making together. The counselor stepped forward again and, without ceremony, set the athletics plaque face down on the table. The principal announced a brief recess and asked coaches and staff to join him in the office. Parents stood. Some approached me with faces that said I am sorry and I should have asked sooner. Others hung back, stunned by the way a night can tilt when one sentence turns a room. Dad gripped my arm hard enough to bruise. He leaned close, teeth clenched, and whispered a new sentence. Different words but the same old song. You will regret this. I peeled his fingers away one by one and let his hand fall. Whoa. I will not. Ryan tried for one last performance. He lifted his hands to the audience as if calming a crowd at a pep rally and called out that this was a misunderstanding, that I was troubled, that I always had been. But the people who had laughed at his jokes for years did not laugh. They lowered their eyes. They gathered their kids. The coach finally looked up and shook his head once, slow and heavy. The spell was broken. In the principal's office, under harsher lights, the counselor and principal sat across from Dad and from me. Ryan paced. I did not sit until they asked me to. I laid a third copy of my pages on the table and said the line I had practiced for the adults who decide whether truth has a place to stand. You are not a court, but you are a gate. Choose which side you want to be on when you open it. The principal nodded again in that quiet way that means a person has decided to be brave. He said the award would not be presented tonight and might never be. He said an outside review would begin in the morning and that my documentation was already registered with district leadership. The counselor added that the school would make space for any other student who needed to speak, and that no one would be punished for coming forward. Dad sputtered and pointed and said words like reputations and donors and you people, but the office did not bend around him anymore. He stormed out and then stormed back in and then stormed out for good, the way a man does when every door he tries no longer opens to the room where he is clapped for. Ryan left without a word. For the first time since I had known him, he walked small. I did not feel triumphant. Felt something better. Felt steady. Outside, the gym had thinned to clusters. A girl I recognized from the freshman team stood near the exit, eyes red. She touched my sleeve as I passed and whispered thank you like it was a secret. A teacher with chalk dust on his cuff told me he wished he had asked how I was sooner. The counselor squeezed my hand and said you did exactly what you came to do. At home, the house was quiet in a new way. Not tense. Not waiting. Just quiet. Made tea. I sat at the kitchen table and looked at the place on the floor where I had once sat with my back against the door, keeping the world out because I had no one to let in. I thought of the girl I had been at 19, and the girl at 15 before that, and every version of me who learned to shrink to survive. I told them, out loud in the empty kitchen, that I was sorry it took so long. I also told them that we did it. In the days that followed, the school sent a letter to families. Words like investigation and student safety and integrity were printed in clean lines that could not be brushed aside. The award was rescinded. Colleges stopped calling. The district opened a new reporting channel that did not route through men like my father. 2 other girls met with the counselor. 1 boy did too. Home, Dad tried a different performance. He brought flowers. He said the word misunderstood a dozen ways. He said men are under attack now, as if the world had flipped upside down and left him dizzy. He said he never meant harm with boys will be boys, that it was just a phrase that I had twisted it. I let him talk until the room wore out the words. Then I told him the sentence I had waited years to hand back. Your sentence is why I needed mine. I did not slam a door. Closed it gently. Boundaries built quietly last longer. He does not fill rooms the way he used to. That is not my doing. That is the nature of light. Ryan left town for a while. I do not know where he went. I do know he stopped knocking on doors that did not belong to him. Sometimes people ask what I took back that night. They want a list to fit on a screen. The truth is longer and simpler. I took back my name in my own mouth. I took back the hallway and the kitchen and the right to stand where the microphone is. I took back the power to say what happened and have the room decide to hear me instead of the man who smiles. Years later, when I stand in other rooms that still love to applaud, I watch the door. There is always a girl or a boy leaning near it, deciding whether to leave or to speak. When they step forward, I make room by moving 1 step to the side and saying the only sentence that ever mattered after the first one broke me. We are listening. I used to think vengeance would look like fire. Turns out it looks like paper and a steady voice and a stage that belongs to everyone. That night in the gym, I did not set anything on fire. I burned down a sentence that had kept me small. My father once said boys will be boys. I do not know if that was ever true. I know only this. I took everything back when I made those boys, and the men clapping for them, listen. They told me to stay quiet. They told me peace was more important than truth. But silence was never peace. It was prison. The night I spoke, my stepbrother's smile cracked, and my father's excuses crumbled. The room chose to hear me, not them. You can take back your voice. You can take back your power. And you can take back everything they tried to bury. If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel. Share these stories so more voices are heard. Because the louder we speak, the harder it is for anyone to silence us again.